Dr. Richard Ruhling is a former medical professional, missionary, and the author of How It All Ends. He combines his medical expertise and biblical insights to explore the intersection of health, prophecy, and geopolitics in this thought-provoking book. And Dr. Ruhling is on the line with us here. How are you today?
It's great to be with you, Toby. Thank you for the privilege and honor.
So, what was it that inspired you to write this book, How It All Ends?
I'm seeing that in the Bible, Amos 3, 7, and 8, that God says he won't do anything without revealing it, which means that there's a lot revealed that we're not seeing, okay? In fact, even in the last letter to the last church in Revelation 3, verse 17, it says you're blind and naked. Speaking of the pastors, okay? Agalos is the Greek word for messenger. The pastors are the messenger to the church, and the angels are not, it's badly translated angels, but angels are not blind and naked, but pastors might be, and they are the messenger to the church. Yeah. So, and that's what the meaning of agalos is messenger. So I'm seeing that I will give you an example of later on how Christendom is divided over wrong issues, it seems like to me. And anyway, but let it unfold as you want to.
Yes. Well, the book explores the connection between the biblical end times and the involvement of Muslims, particularly in light of Christ's warning for Jerusalem. So, are you able to elaborate on that connection?
Yes. When Christ was asked about the end of the world in Matthew 24, and I'm giving text so that if people want to stop your video or whatever, they can record it and listen to the text to see the proof of what I'm saying. I'm not just shooting the breeze. Yeah. Matthew 24th chapter is about signs of the end of the world. When the disciples asked, what's the sign of it and of the end of the world, he gave a number of signs and mentioned in verse 15 the book of Daniel to read and understand it. And in Daniel 8th chapter, there is a political cartoon of a ram and a goat, a conflict. And we use political cartoons, Russia's the bear and the U.S. is the eagle and that kind of thing. But this conflict, the ram is pushing from the Middle East, and Muslims take the ram as a special thing because they believe they're descendants of Ishmael, who was spared by a ram sacrifice. So it's very appropriate for Daniel to use this imagery to represent in Daniel 8:20, the kings of Media and Persia are today Iraq and Iran. And we have already done Iraq, okay? We have broken the horn, or the king of Iraq, which was Saddam. He's gone. So sometimes people say, well, prophecy was written later just to fit the thing. Well, how could they lie 2,000 years? It was Daniel saw it, and we did Iraq. And the question is, what makes us angry to go against Iran? Because we don't want war with Iran. Iraq was bad. We left men and equipment over there. It looked like stupid stuff, when they did that recently, I guess, a few years ago. But, it wasn't in the first administration before. But anyway, never mind that. I would just say the imagery of why does the goat get angry to fight and break Iran is seen elsewhere in Zechariah 14. It's the next to the last book in the Old Testament, and it says in verse 14:1, the day of the Lord comes. Now that is misunderstood by a lot of ministers as his coming in the sky, but it's 5 times in the book of Joel, but no second coming. If you read the book of Joel, you can't see where Christ comes in the sky, but 5 references to the day of the Lord. And one of them, for instance, I'll give you an example from is in the very first chapter. The day of the Lord in verse 15 is in the context of verse 3 and 4. You tell your children, let them tell their children, and them another generation. And the biblical generation is 40 years. It says in Hebrews 3, 9 and 10, God bore the rebellious generation of Israel 40 years in the wilderness. So 4 times 40 is 160. So I'm seeing the timelines as fitting this year. What happened 160 years ago? It was Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation that he gave to make equality for black people as well as white people. You shouldn't let the slaves go free. Okay, well, racial strife is on an end. Right now. Racial equality. There's more and more racial slurs and this and that, and and we're wondering what in the world is happening to America. Well, that's the verse 4. After you tell your children and they tell their children another generation, it says what the cankerworm has eaten and left, the palmer worm has eaten and left. And what the palmer worm's left, the cankerworm, and the palmer worm, the locust, the caterpillar, four generations of insects, and there's nothing left. Well, I think there's nothing left of some of the things the pioneers stood for in equality, and we're facing big trouble in America, basically. So the timing seems good. Actually, in 2015, there were a bunch of signs that pointed to this year, 2023. The sun was darkened and the moon turned to blood before the day of the Lord. It says in Joel 2:31, there's one of those references to the day of the Lord. And there was a rare solar eclipse on the equinox, followed by a blood moon on Passover, the Jewish day of judgment, in 2015. And the Iran nuclear deal, in 1 Thessalonians 5, it says in verse 2 and 3, the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night when they're saying peace and safety. Sudden destruction is coming. Well, the Iran nuclear deal is peace and safety. It's just talk. Iran hasn't honored that. They're trying to go after the big bomb, etc. So these are signs that I think were a 7-year warning. When Joseph was in Egypt, he gave Pharaoh a 7-year warning. He says there's going to be 7 good years and then 7 of famine, because Pharaoh had a dream of 7 fat cows eaten up by 7 lean cows, and 7 fat ears of corn eaten up by 7 lean ears of corn. So famine is coming, and I believe the 7-year warning is appropriate from 2015. It would go through 2022, and I thought this spring would have been huge, but with events. But the biblical year actually begins in the spring. It doesn't begin in January and end in December. So I'm not dead in the water yet. and since a month ago, Hamas has attacked Israel, and it's escalating. It's getting bigger. In fact, I saw a headline recently, 61 attacks on U.S. facilities in the past month. And that doesn't sound like it's melting away, to me. I would just say I believe that we're going to see Zechariah 14, the nations will be gathered against Jerusalem. In fact, Erdogan, president of Turkey, has appealed for that. For 57 Muslim nations to siege Israel. And he said Jerusalem was our city as part of the Ottoman Empire. Well, that was 100 years ago, but they're wanting to resurrect history and get it again. So I just say, all bets are off, but I believe the Bible reveals these things ahead of time because God knows the end from the beginning. He says in Isaiah 46, verse 10, for anybody who wants to look it up, and in the previous chapter, he proves it. And I want to, for anybody that's atheistic and doesn't believe there's a God, I'd like to just suggest looking at Isaiah 45:1, first verse. God names Cyrus 100 years before he was born and told how he would conquer Babylon when 2 river gates would be left open. The previous verse is talking about rebuilding Jerusalem, the temple, and so on. So how did this play out? Cyrus knew nothing about this prophet Isaiah and Jerusalem, but Daniel was taken captive 70 years earlier when Jerusalem was conquered by Babylon. And here comes Cyrus to conquer Babylon, and he diverted the river Euphrates into a reservoir, and at night marched under the wall of Babylon, and he discovered 2 gates left open. So when Daniel showed him the ancient writings from the prophet Isaiah, Cyrus was impressed. He let Israel, he freed them from bondage and helped pay their way back to their homeland because he was that impressed. He wanted to cooperate with his destiny because the gates were left open, and he conquered Babylon without any loss of life. So to me, that's huge, as well as Iraq today. I mean, they didn't. Sometimes they say, well, they wrote those things later. Well, they couldn't write Iraq later because we've had a Bible around for hundreds of years since King James Version in 1611. So anyway, that's just. I believe there is a God. I know as a physician, the body is so complex it could not evolve. In fact, the most famous atheist of the past century, Anthony Flew, PhD from Oxford University, wrote a book, There Is No God, until he discovered the complexity of the DNA molecule, that it could not possibly have evolved chemically, molecules bumping into each other and forming the double helix thing that it makes us who we are by our inheritance from our parents. And he rewrote the book, There Is a God, okay, because and he was the most vocal atheists of the last century. Anyway, I want to get on with the Bible because to me, it's that the Bible is huge in what it's showing us, and I believe that what I've just told you is coming this coming spring. And if you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, that was Christ saying, when you see that, you know its desolation is nigh. But Jerusalem represented God's people, and I believe there's going to be persecution in this country also, and not Jews. It may be fundamental Christians who are against the New World Order, because the New World Order is a UN deal, and I don't think it's a good deal from the Bible standpoint, but I won't go there right now.
Yeah. Well, in the book, you emphasize the importance of being informed and ready. So how do you suggest readers apply these insights from the book to stay informed and be prepared for maybe some unfolding events that could occur?
Good for you. Good question. And it really depends on really what's coming. You know, if you're going to run a marathon in the Olympics, you don't train by lifting weights. You do it by running, you know. And if we understand what's coming, we can get tuned in better. And I'm seeing that Christians, I mentioned this earlier, are divided over issues that they don't even see right. And there are half of Christians who think we're going to be snatched to heaven. They call it a rapture. And there's another half of Christians who think that we got to wait 7 years through all the trouble, and then we're going to be ready for heaven. And neither one is right, as I see it, okay? And I'm going to tell you the ancient history that fits with parallel for us, okay? U.S. as Egypt in the Bible, because Israel went down to Egypt in a time of famine. Joseph interpreted the Pharaoh's dreams, and Pharaoh said, well, you're so smart, you be vice president. And Joseph said, let's store up the grain for 7 years so we can survive the next 7. So his parents came down, his dad and his brothers came down in the time of famine. They didn't have food up in Israel. By the way, this was partly the imagery of Daniel 11th chapter, the king of the north, king of the south. The idea was that Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome all came down through the Holy Land, Israel, to fight Egypt, the king of the south. And it was an abusive situation. You know, soldiers coming through your country, taking your food, maybe sleeping with your daughters or whatever, you know, bad deal. And so, but it's the king of the north, king of the south, the running scenario through history. But in the time of the end, it says the king of the north overflows. And I'm seeing that Babylon is false religions today, and I believe this country was formed by Protestants fleeing the old world to get to freedom in the new world, where they made a constitution that we could all be free. You don't have to burn at the stake if you have a Bible in your home or something like that, which was historically a fact, but it's hidden today. But if you read Fox's Book of Martyrs or certain books, it was bad news, because the papacy does the same things as the Muslims. In fact, the Muslims got it from the papacy. They sent crusades down there to kill the Muslims and so on. Anyway, bottom line is, and this is not about, I don't hate Catholics. I have had half a dozen very good friends, Catholics, fine Christians, but I'm talking about secret societies. When John F. Kennedy talked about the idea of secret societies as repugnant, he was dead a week later when he, so the high up government leaders of the CIA and the Homeland Security, a nun who had been raped called it Romeland Security. But I just say lots of bad stuff were happening, and Protestant pastors as well. They don't all control themselves, and they have affairs with this or that. But the Bible is not favorable to those things. And I just say the Bible reveals what's coming, and it includes another Exodus type of event. God punished Egypt for enslaving Israel and throwing their babies in the river. And today, America has enslaved most people in alcohol, tobacco, drugs. I'm a retired physician, but I say medical care is a form of bondage. If you have to go to the doctor every month and get a blood test or a prescription to help your symptoms, not good. You know, it is bondage, and it's costly. And really, I'll give you another example. The British Medical Journal reported 73% less severity for healthcare workers who got COVID, but who ate a plant-based diet, vegan. Okay. And so why does the CDC lie to us and say personal immunity is not good enough. They should be researching this stuff and telling us eat less sugar too. I had caught the flu one time when I was working emergency room, and usually the flu comes after the holidays when there's been so much cookie, cakes, candy, and rich diets that people catch the flu. And the little white cells that fight infection and germs will swell up and get lazy, and they won't fight the germs when they eat all that sugar and stuff. So, and we're coming up to that time again. So this is a warning for your audience to go easy, drink some orange juice or something, but take it easy. Anyway, Egypt enslaved people, threw their babies in the river. We've thrown 63 million babies in the trash can. We're worse than Egypt, this Christian nation, supposedly. So we're going to get judgment too. Basically, if God is fair, he has to judge us. And we're beginning to see the troubles. You know, it is on its way. And how exactly should we say it will come? When Muslims attack Jerusalem and take the city, it says in Zechariah 14, verse 2, the city will be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished, half the city goes into captivity. That's bad news. But those Muslims will celebrate their mosque and the Quran, which says Allah has no son, when suddenly the Lord is going to roar from Jerusalem. The heavens and earth will shake, and this will, everybody in the world, I think, will know that something big and different has happened, and we're in a different era. We are in the day of the Lord, the end time period. In fact, that phrase, day of the Lord, is first found in Isaiah 2, verse 12, and in verse 19 and 21, they both say that God is going to shake terribly the earth, and I believe that's this spring. And I'll tell you specifically why and when. It's hidden when, bad translations have hidden it, but I'm going to help explain it now. There are two second comings in Matthew 24th chapter, verse 30. Christ comes in power and glory. And a chapter later, in the middle of chapter 25, verse 31, he comes in power and glory. And between it are 7 parables that point to the second month in spring as a provision. I call it a 9/11 provision because it's number, if God knows the end from the beginning, maybe he put this warning in Numbers 9, verse 10 and 11. He knew 9/11. Every American should get this, okay? So pay attention, everybody on the audience. It provides for Passover as a time of judgment. In Egypt, death fell on the Egyptians, but the Israelites were watching and praying. They were supposed to eat the Passover lamb and leave nothing till morning. Watching means be awake. They were awake that night. And Christ asked his disciples on the eve of Passover when he had the Last Supper, hours later, he said, watch with me. Couldn't you watch 1 hour? In other words, be awake. The Greek word Gregorio means be awake. So that's what Passover, if we're observing it. But there are 2 reasons why it was delayed till later. If an Israelite took a trip to a long country or something far away and couldn't get back, they were not excused. Passover meant judgment. They were to observe it a month later in the second spring month, not April, but May. Okay. And the point is also, as the days of Noah, Christ said, when he said, no man knows the day or hour, but as the days of Noah. Well, the flood came with Passover timing, but in the second spring month again. Why? Because Noah had contact with a dead body. He buried Methuselah, his grandfather, who died as a sign the flood was coming. Methuselah's name meant, when he dies, it will come. And the people thought Noah was crazy because it never rained, but it sure did then, and the Grand Canyon is a proof that there must have been a lot of water sometime back, and I'm in that state, by the way, Arizona. So I would just say, God knows the end from the beginning. He's declared it, and Christ gave parables like when 5 women missed the wedding, he said, watch. The bad translation is you don't know, and they interpret that as nobody will ever know. When in reality, the word eido means be aware, consider, perceive, understand. He was saying you don't understand to his disciples because it's like a man traveling to a far country. The reason they didn't understand was because it was having that provision. It wasn't regular Passover. It was a month later. And I got interesting news for you because if you were to Google dark day, those 2 words, dark day, you will discover that historically, May 19 in 1780 was a unexplainably dark day. Cows came in from the field, chickens went to roost, people in midday, this was midday, they had to light a lamp to read outside. And the point is that New Englanders who were Christians thought that was a sign Christ was coming soon. A sign, it says in Joel 2:31, the sun will be darkened, the moon turned to blood before the day of the Lord. Well, he didn't come for a couple hundred years, but 200 years later, on the anniversary date, there was a dark day. The day before was Mount St. Helens eruption in the northwest of the United States, and overnight, wind carried the volcanic ash over 3 states, so that May 19, 1980 was a dark day over 3 states. And, that can only, some people say, oh, that's just a coincidence. Well, they don't want to believe in the Bible, okay? But as someone else, Einstein, in fact, Albert Einstein said, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. Well, why would God want to remain anonymous? I'll tell you why, okay? I'll give you a personal experience I had that when I was in medical training, I remarked to my wife one morning as she was standing on a cold floor with bare feet, honey, you should have slippers on. And I didn't say, she was busy and I was busy, but a minute later, our son, 5 years old, comes running with mama's slippers. And it did me so much good to see him doing that voluntarily. He wasn't told to do it. He just did it of his own. Now, I could have said, I'm going to beat you if you don't get mama's slippers. That would give me no joy. I'm a big guy. How big is that to beat a little kid but to see it happen spontaneously, God is like that. He doesn't want to beat us and prove himself to us that we're going to burn or this or that, but he wants it. I think he made monkeys so that people that didn't want to believe in him could believe they came from a monkey. He wants an out. He wants people to do what they want, but if we're wise, we'll see that his rules are real and good and fair. If we lie, cheat, and steal, we're not happy people, and it doesn't make good for society either for that kind of stuff. So the 10 Commandments were a great reason for his kingdom. He says, if you keep my covenant, you'll be a kingdom. And kingdom means dominion of a king. He has wise rules, but they're voluntary. He's not going to beat us to death as soon as we make a mistake. In fact, it says times of ignorance, he's winking. He's been winking a lot at our ignorance, but during this time of the next 7 years, I think we better get it. We better want to do the right thing, and God help me. And we can do it with his help. We can't do it without his help, is the idea. So that's my take on the thing. But I got to get back to May 19 now, because next spring, it's unique because the papal Gregorian calendar has messed up the God's calendar when a new moon meant a new month. But the beginning of February and March and April isn't a new moon. That new moon can happen in the middle of the month, the 3rd or the 13th day or the 23rd day. It's any old time with the Gregorian calendar. They messed up God's marking the importance of a new moon, which ties in with God's calendar of when things are going to happen. Because in Leviticus 25, Passover is when judgment falls. God says, I will execute judgment on, that was in Exodus 12:12, by the way. And that night, verse 42 says it was night of the Lord. That's the only phrase once, but day of the Lord is 25 times, and I think it's 25 times bigger, time of judgment. So, but what I'm saying is next spring, it happens, the May 19 happens to fall on the day that Noah entered the ark. And that was a decision time for those people. And when Noah went in and the people said, no, I don't want to go in. And Noah was inviting people, come in, be saved. Well, they thought he was crazy and they didn't want to get laughed at. Well, a few days later, they were beating on the door wanting to get in, okay, because it was raining, the windows of heaven opened and the fountains of the deep opened up and water was rising. So, I would just say this coming spring, May 19, it will be a choice. And in my opinion, Israel left Egypt. I think we ought to get out of cities, because I heard a guy talking on he was deputy director of Homeland Security, Jonathan Hollerman, I think, if I remember right. And he is a survival specialist. He said he lectured pilots who get down behind enemy lines how to survive. And the survival literature shows that if there is an EMP attack, he's been amazed that we haven't had one, by the way. He said it'll be so easy for some foreign country to blast off a nuclear thing high above our sky anywhere. They didn't have to hit the city even, but it would wipe out the transformers coast to coast if it was in the middle of this country high enough. And so the point is that without transformers, you cannot pump gas to those truckers who are bringing food to your city. And it's going to be, his estimate is 90% of people in city will die. There'll be gangs roaming the streets, and there will be martial law, no freedom, etc. I say, take a vacation on May 18, get out of town and get out of Dodge, or 19. but don't wait to see what's going to happen, because when the people before the flood waited to see what happened, it wasn't good. I'd say believe God, and what I'm saying, I'm betting my life and my money. It takes a little money to talk to you. Thank you very much. But anyway, that's the essence of this. And I thank you for, I don't know how much time we have. How have we done so far?
Okay, we got a little bit more time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've covered quite a bit, but if people want to get a good book, and in the book, by the way, I told you how that the British Medical Journal reported 73% less severity with COVID on a vegan diet. I have a video of 88 minutes. It's worth, if there are people in your audience who are diabetic or have blood pressure, cholesterol, heart problems, whatever, that diet will reverse most disease. Cleveland Clinic's cardiologist, Dr. Esselstyn, is reporting on that. And prescription drugs are dangerous. I mean, I'm telling you now, as I was board certified in internal medicine, I had a year of cardiology before teaching at Loma Linda University. I know health better than 99% of doctors. And I'm telling you, if you had a COVID shot, don't get another one, because it's dangerous. And my former wife got a bladder infection. She tried herbs and got a little impatient and went to her doctor for a prescription because I had retired. And she didn't, after 3 days, she didn't need the prescription anymore. She was okay. But months later, she got a rash under her skin. I said, you should see your doctor for a blood test. He did. He called her urgently the next morning, referring her to a hematologist who put her in the hospital, did a bone marrow exam. No platelets in the bone marrow. He took out her spleen, still not better, treated her with high steroids and transfusions until she died of a stroke. From an antibiotic, she took 3 days. And I remarried a woman who was a nurse, but her husband also died in this was an intensive care where he died after getting the same antibiotic IV. So I wouldn't, I'm saying medical, people think, oh, that's the other guy. Those statistics don't apply to me. Sooner or later, the chickens come home to roost, and it's a bad situation for taking drugs when you could reverse that with diet and eat well. I'm talking to you now. I will be 82 a couple 3 months from now. So I would just say, I'm in excellent health, and it's because as I grew up frying my own hamburgers and eggs and finishing off a lot of ice cream. But I was sickly also until in high school, college. I changed my diet. I've been a vegetarian most of my life, and I've done it well. And I've had teachers. 2 years ago, a teacher of mine, and he was a heart surgeon. He actually took a team around to certain countries and did heart surgery for little babies that needed it. And but he died at 104, vegan. He helped train other doctors, surgical residents, until he was 95.
Wow.
In surgery. Now that's yeah, wow is right. That's better time. Anyway, but let me say, get my book. Oh, what I was going to say is this video that has 88 minutes of really good stuff for anybody that's got health problems, or their family does, or their friends do. They get that link in my book. If they buy a How It All Ends, the book that you said, it's only $2.99. I put the link in my book, and my book, they get the book as well. Okay, that explains these things that they ought to read, and at the end, get another book. Okay, because we're talking about destiny. Things are important. And the wedding parables, in Luke's wedding parable, we can be ruler over all that he has. Since my name is Ruhling, I really wanted to understand how that happens. I think I do. And I don't think the pastors usually arguing over pre-trib or post-trib rapture understand the wedding parables. Because really, when God took Israel from Egypt to Sinai for a covenant, he later said, I'm married to you. He was regarding the covenant as a marriage. And we're going to need to make a covenant to be there. And that's my other book that they ought to get after they get How It All Ends.
Well, where are we able to find the book?
Amazon.com. I do have a website, Health, Happiness, and Destiny. It's in the process. I'm sorry. It should be better. You ask somebody from Fiverr and they're overseas, and it's one thing after another. But anyway, 3 words. words everybody wants, healthhappinessdestiny.com. Click on the About link at the top, About Health, Happiness, and Destiny. And there's some information there. Or go to Amazon.com, type in my name. Last name is Ruhling, spelled with an H, Ruhling. And look at my books and get what might appeal to you. They're all cheap. I'm not, this is not about making money for me. I'm burdened to give the information to people. That's why my digital copies are all like $2.99 or something. They're not expensive because I just want everybody to get it. But if you like a soft cover, paper, ink, and postage always cost Amazon. In fact, even the DVD that I have free on the link, Amazon charges $9.70 something plus $4 shipping. So you can see that I'm giving you something that would cost you $13, $14 on Amazon, but I've got the link free to it in my book on page 7 of How It All Ends.
Well, many thanks for talking to us today. It's been great to have you on the show.
Well, it's good to talk to you. Thank you so much, Toby, and God bless you. And let's study the Bible a little more. You know, the TV is baloney. You know, I have never owned a TV in my adult life. I was told that if it's important news, you'll hear about it. But you know, and the internet has news too. But those love stories and violent programs and things like that, our kids are learning it, and then they're shooting somebody else. So don't go there.